BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box.
Okay, hello everybody. Today is Friday. Another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. First, I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who has been following these weekly episodes about Jack the Ripper and the letters that were mailed in 1888. And some of you might be listening to this one as it comes out regularly, and some of you may be listening to this as part of the Jack the Ripper playlist that has been assembled here on Black Box Online Radio. To be honest with you guys, I was planning on doing an episode about the From Hell letter as a one-off, just a single episode, but then I began to read more and more about Jack the Ripper, so I decided to do one about each of these three communications: the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jackie postcard, and the From Hell letter. And this playlist is actually assembled in reverse, so some of the later episodes were actually recorded first. And you can see a very strong tendency to get more outrageous as you go back in time with this one. The absolute first episode I ever did about Jack the Ripper on Black Box Online Radio was talking about the H.H. Holmes connection, about how somebody thought that Jack the Ripper and the serial killer H.H. Holmes from America were the same person. And I think that that is purely natural. That is just curiosity, and sometimes you just want to know what are people saying. And I also believe that Jack the Ripper is one of the most famous serial killer legends out there, emphasis on the word legend, so people are going to grow up with a little bit of familiarity about how there was the possibility of a murderous individual who not only killed people in 1888, but also mutilated their bodies and wrote in letters either bragging about the crimes or taking credit for the murders, and in even one instance mailing in half of a human kidney. So I invite you to explore the Jack the Ripper episodes here on Black Box Online Radio, and I've been doing a regular segment about the Long Island serial killer that's coming out on Wednesdays, and of course every Monday is Zodiac Monday here on BBOR. And a great way that you can support this show, in addition to everything that was said in the intro, is to go over to BuyMeACoffee.com. There's a link to that in the description box, and if you'd like to make a contribution, always appreciated. But to get to some of the basics about the Ripper, Jack the Ripper is someone who possibly murdered 5 people from August 31st to November 9th of 1888, and these crimes remain unsolved to this day. 4 out of the 5 victims were mutilated in addition to being murdered. They were all female. They were all mostly thought to have worked in the sex work profession. I'm really trying to be careful with my words. The first victim was Polly Nichols, who was murdered on August 31st of 1888 in the early AM hours. Then on September 8th of 1888, Annie Chapman is murdered and mutilated as well. And then comes the birth of the true Jack the Ripper phenomenon, and that is the Dear Boss letter that was mailed on September 25th of 1888, and it was received by the Central News Agency on September 27th. Now, I'm going to share one thing, just one observation, and that is that the envelope that was used to mail the Dear Boss letter says, "The Boss." And some people say that it's trying to say something else in a little more calligraphic handwriting, but it looks like it just says "The Boss." And that is, I think, just a little bit of trolling going on the envelope. And to read the content of the Dear Boss letter, I'll just read the text directly. "Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about Leather Apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job with it, but it went thick like glue, and I can't use it." And I may have missed a word. To be more precisely, save some red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and send the police officers, just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away, if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. P.S. Wasn't good enough to get to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands, curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. And there you have it. That is mostly how the legend of Jack the Ripper was born, because of this letter, which would then be followed by the Saucy Jackie postcard, and then followed by the From Hell letter. And in the majority of Jack the Ripper discussions that I had encountered, it seemed that these three communications were the ones that were seriously discussed as if they could have come from the killer. But there are over 1,000 letters that were written in by Jack the Ripper, so says theripper.org, and they were all investigated according to the authorities, law enforcement at the time, if they are indeed telling the truth. And last week on the Zodiac Killer News Report, I devoted a little bit of time at the end talking about the Openshaw letter, one that is a little bit less frequently discussed. I guess you'd put it in the pile of unconfirmed letters. But there is a very widely held belief. Actually, let's just say there are 3 widely held beliefs about Jack the Ripper. 3 leading theories involving the Dear Boss letter. Number 1, it was written by the real killer of these women, and that those 3 communications that I said are authentic. The Saucy Jackie postcard, as well as the From Hell letter. One person wrote them, one person committed the murders, same person. The second theory is that there was somebody writing letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit, and that there was some type of serial killer operation going on. And the third theory is that this was an absolute hoax, completely fabricated by the newspapers, specifically a publication called The Star. And I'm sure you already have a few ideas right now, so if you would like to weigh in the comments section, I would love to know what you think about Jack the Ripper and the Dear Boss letter. The first one is that someone is not only taking credit for murders that he committed, but he is also bragging about it. He is giving explanations about how and why he's doing what he's doing, mostly that he's demented, mostly that he thinks he is smarter than other people and he can do this without getting caught. He's giving details that seem very personal, that he tried to get the blood into a ginger beer bottle and he wanted to write a letter in blood, but then it got thick like glue, so he couldn't do it and he had to use red ink instead. And then later on with the Saucy Jackie postcard, he talks about the reasons why 2 additional murders were committed, the murders of Liz Stride and Catherine Eddowes, who were murdered on the same night. He said double event this time, The first one squealed a bit, and this communication, the Dear Boss letter, also says the word squealed. Someone, again, is providing explanations about why the crimes are the way they are. And then, of course, with the From Hell letter, the kidney of someone was mailed in, half a kidney actually, preserved in some type of solution, along with the correspondence. So that's why some people think, hey, simplest explanation, one person, one killer, one letter writer, it's all the same person. And there's so many details that would support that. But I know a lot of you who are listening to this right now are probably thinking about the Zodiac killer as well, another serial killer who wrote letters taking credit for murders. And in the Zodiac's first letter, he said something that I don't see in this Jack the Ripper letter. I shall state some facts that only I and the police know. He's trying to prove that he took credit for the crimes, and he gives, a whole list of things that should not have been reported in the papers, or that information that only the police and the killer should have known. And I don't think the details in the Dear Boss letter are things that only the killer would have known. Like, how do we know somebody actually tried to collect the blood in a ginger beer bottle and to write a letter with it, and then the blood went thick like glue, so he had to use red ink instead? How do we know that's what really happened? Someone could just as easily have been making it up. I do confess that is a very odd thing to fabricate. And even as I say this now, I just thought of something for the first time. Maybe if this is a hoax, that somebody could have taken the blood from some type of butchered animal or something like that, maybe a cow or a pig, and they were going to write a hoax letter in blood. Hoax meaning taking credit for a murder that he didn't commit, but that went thick like glue. I don't know, that's just such an odd thing to say if it didn't really happen. So says me anyway, but as you see, I'm not going to endorse any particular theory at this point. But the second one, the concept of there is a real serial killer, but the letters are faked. Well, in the next episode, I'll talk more about Dr. Andrea Nini, who did some linguistic analysis on the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard, and she made the conclusion that they have both come from the same person. And right now, I would just like to zoom in on the Saucy Jackie postcard, and overall, just based on the appearance of the handwriting, I think that they're fairly similar. Maybe not a perfect match, but mostly similar, so that I can comprehend. But I don't think that they are a complete identical match, but maybe you would put it in the close enough category. And then once you get to the From Hell letter, the handwriting is very different, but it's different on purpose. Nobody actually writes like that. Someone was intentionally disguising their handwriting for the From Hell letter. So says me. But it also appears that there still is a reddish tint on the Saucy Jackie postcard. But the things that would support how a single serial killer is operating, well, these women are mutilated and murdered, and even Liz Stride, who was killed by the Ripper, but not mutilated. She is killed in the vicinity of the other crimes, albeit on the other side of Whitechapel Road. It's possible, but if you're going to go use that theory, I think it would be much more plausible actually to say that just Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly were all murdered by the same person. And to be very honest with you, the Ripper's third crime was the murder of Liz Stride, who had her throat slit, and someone tried to leave rather quickly, it seems. I don't believe that that was the Ripper, or I said there's about a 10% chance. But with the other victims, there are similarities. Now, how would somebody be able to be aware of a serial killer operating who wasn't taking credit for his crimes? Is this someone from law enforcement? Probably not. How about a journalist? Because that's what journalists do. They investigate, and after the murder of Annie Chapman, someone could figure out, hey, these crimes have happened in a similar way. Okay, this is a serial killer. There's a serial killer who is attacking women in England, and someone connected the dots, and then they wrote a letter taking credit for crimes plural that they didn't commit. The next theory is that this is a flat-out hoax. Somebody is writing letters taking credit for crimes that they didn't commit. No serial killer. These are all unrelated murders, and this is all fabricated by a publication called The Star, and the letters were fabricated by an individual named Frederick Best, who would then go on to confess to fabricating the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard 43 years later in 1931. Did that actually happen? Did Frederick Best actually write these? I do not know, and I definitely think that a lot of the news media and even Wikipedia are leaning toward these being a hoax by news media. I mean, the BBC and some of the other major publications out there. It's almost as if they are really pushing the Ripper hoax theory. And you'll even find these lines about how experts say that these letters are a hoax, but they don't provide too many explanations. And in the episode on the Saucy Jackie postcard, I go into a little bit more depth about Dr. Andrea Nini's analysis, so if you'd like to listen to that one, I would invite you to do so to hear all about that. But what would be some clues about how the Dear Boss letter could be just a complete hoax, that there is no serial killer, and that this kill rampage that the Ripper did in 1888 was not even a single person? Well, the first point is the Dear Boss letter comes after the murder of Annie Chapman, not after the murder of Polly Nichols. Now, why would somebody do that if they're trying to take credit for this crime spree? Why do they have to wait until the second murder to take place to show off that they are the person responsible? I mean, how easy would it have been to say, I am the murderer of that woman at this location. Here's a fact that only I and the police would know. Well, I mean, I'm not sure, but this is an unsolved case. So, I mean, that is a supporting point, that someone had figured out that either a serial killer was operating or they could make it look like a serial killer was operating. But I think a very big reason why people think that this is all a hoax is just a previously stated point that a lot of these details could have been fabricated by someone's imagination or a very careful prankster. To help us out with a discussion on the Dear Boss letter, I'm going to go over to the JackTheRipperTour.com and look at the article that was posted there. On September 27th of 1888, as fear of the uncaught killer reached fever pitch, the Central News Agency, a press agency based in Blackfriars in London, received a small envelope addressed The Boss. Yeah, that's some serious trolling. It's like when the person said that the kidney that was mailed in with the From Hell letter was very nice. And it contained a letter written in red ink. It soon became apparent that the author of the letter was claiming responsibility for the murders of the women in Whitechapel and Spitalfields. And one more time, the text of the Dear Boss letter. I keep on hearing that the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. The joke about the leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff, in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do shall clip the lady's ears and send to the police officers, just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away if I get the chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. And there is the P.S. there, but I do want to point out that both the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard use that word squealed, and the Saucy Jackie postcard is a follow-up to the Dear Boss letter. I think most parties are in agreement with that. But perhaps you heard in this letter that the killer said that he was going to send in the victim's ears with the next correspondence, and did that happen? Nope, the Saucy Jackie postcard did not contain the victim's ears. Instead, it contained some type of explanation as to why he couldn't do that. And that is one point that I will share from Andrea Nini. She says that more or less it is an apology for not being able to send in the victim's ears, but then half a kidney shows up in a future letter. So, I mean, it appears the Ripper should have had something to take credit for the crime. And I mean, what do you think, though? Do you think that that suggests that this is a hoax, or is somebody telling the truth? I said I was going to send you the ears, but I couldn't because I thought somebody was on to me, so I had to sneak away. And there is one point, though, that I talked about in a previous Jack the Ripper episode months ago, and that was that some people think that these crimes were not sophisticated, that they were not committed by any type of brilliant surgical mind, or they weren't even committed by a doctor. One reason is that Jack the Ripper says that he is a doctor now. Or really, it's wasn't good enough to post this before. I got all the red ink off my hands. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. Well, they think that that person is actually hinting that he is not a doctor, and also that people do not perform surgery in dark alleys where there aren't even street lamps and it's just absolute pitch black. They said that this is more of a deranged individual who is mutilating the women, and if there even is a single killer. That one I'm not convinced of. In fact, I think that that perhaps would only be relevant to perhaps the removal of specific organs. But as you heard, though, the Ripper doesn't say he's going to cut out a victim's kidney, or some people think that the Ripper was trying to cut out a baby from one of the victims. You'll find all kinds of stories. The Ripper said he was going to cut a woman's ears off, but he wasn't able to do so. But Jack the Ripper Tour writes, the press agency openly suggested that it was probably a joke, but nonetheless passed it on to the Metropolitan Police for further examination 2 days later. Although it's not clear how the police reacted initially, they followed the author's instructions and held the letter back until the murderer had done a bit more work, at which point, following the next murder, sections of the letter were reproduced in the press on October 1st. What caused the greatest impact, and indeed something that still is felt today, the reproduction of the name Jack the Ripper, a perfect nickname, as the yet-to-be uncaught fiend of the East End roamed. Interestingly, this was not the first missive received by the authorities claiming to be written by the killer. Sir Charles Warren, Chief Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, had been sent a rather rambling one a few days before, but had given it no credence. It did not have a signature, and it certainly was not made public at the time. However, the Dear Boss letter, as it has become known, was guaranteed to cause a stir. But was it genuine? Much has been written about the most infamous of communications, the first of many that would be received, and for a long time to come. But as the first to be published and the first one to bear that now infamous name, it has become iconic. Whether the general public felt that it was genuine, it is hard to say, but many of the leading police officers of the day, the men who had direct responsibility for the investigation of 1888, were asked what they felt about it years later, and the general consensus was that it was a hoax, and that they thought it was from the pen of an enterprising London journalist. And I also want to go over to allthat'sinteresting.com. Perhaps they're not the most like academic website, but this one is written by Marco Markratov, and it is called Jack the Ripper's From Hell Letter and the Macabre Story Behind It, because it begins with something, though, that says, today there are only 3 Ripper letters that investigators believe may be credible: the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jackie postcard, and the From Hell letter. But only the From Hell letter was sent along with a human kidney. And that begs the question, though, about why would somebody have such an easy ability to send in something from the victims? Because these victims aren't only murdered, they're also mutilated, with the exception of Liz Stride. So why not prove that the crimes took place the crimes were committed by a single person with more hard evidence? I mean, we're talking about a scrap of skin or something like that, or a finger or something. It would have been so easy for the Ripper to have done so, but that stuff doesn't take place until the From Hell letter is mailed. And I also want to share with you guys that there's a paper that has been posted online called Dear Boss, Hoax as Collective Narrative. In the case of the Jack the Ripper letters, this one was written by Ted Remington. You can download this for free. It's 23 pages long, and it says that it's going to explore the phenomena of hoaxes as communally constructed narratives by examining the series of letters sent to authorities claiming to be from Jack the Ripper. The study looks at how and why the character of the Ripper was created through these letters and why this figure became a site of public fascination at the time and remains so today. More than simply the work of cranks or psychotics, a study of the letters reveals them to be a way of articulating and managing collective anxieties. Through the work of Kenneth Burke, the essay suggests that the Ripper letters provided a symbolic way of dealing with the social trauma and complex emotional responses triggered by the brutal murders of several prostitutes that gripped London's East End in the autumn of 1888. Well, there is definitely one point that was discussed by some people who are all into this Ripper hoax theory, and that is that publications at the time were allegedly reported to have said that when will the Ripper strike next, that not only were they suggesting that there's going to be another crime, but they're practically predicting it. It's not even addressing it as a possibility. Is the Ripper going to strike next? No, the Ripper will strike again, but when? So it's about creating panic, mass hysteria, absolutely playing into the public's anxieties. One more time, that is written by Ted Remington, and the title of his paper is Dear Boss. And much like the conclusion of the last episode, I would also like to talk about the Zodiac Killer for just a little bit more because I've said it once and I'll say it again. I believe that the answers to the Zodiac Killer mystery will be found in the Jack the Ripper case, and both of these serial killers took credit for the murders via a letter that was mailed after the second crime, not after the first, which they would have both been able to do so. Both of them sent in letters that had misspellings. Both of them mailed in something that belonged to the victims. So the Ripper mailed in the kidney of Catherine Eddowes. The Zodiac Killer mailed in a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt. As I said, I believe the answers to the Zodiac Killer mystery are found in the Jack the Ripper case. And I'm also quite surprised that I don't hear more of the books that are talking about the Zodiac and Jack the Ripper addressing this. Like, for example, during one of the Zodiac Mondays, I was reading a section of Zed Simpson's The Zodiac and Jack the Ripper. It's actually Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer book. And I wasn't really getting that vibe. I felt it was a little bit like the Zodiac, a little bit about Jack the Ripper, but not just saying, hey, look at all of these direct similarities. And very clearly in the past, I've said that the Zodiac Killer is a cheap 20th century Jack the Ripper knockoff. I mean, even the Infographics channel of all places said the Ripper was intensely more vicious than the Zodiac Killer. But a big difference is there's a very high chance that the crimes in Whitechapel in 1888 were mostly a hoax, that there were somebody was writing letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit. And there aren't details that someone couldn't have fabricated. I mean, maybe if someone did have a wild imagination, they could have thought up that thing about pooling blood into a ginger beer bottle and trying to write a letter with it. Or, as I said, maybe they actually tried that with like cow's blood or pig's blood and it didn't work, so they had to use red ink. And maybe it is true that the person who wrote the letter in red ink had red ink on his hands. I mean, just because you have red ink on your hands, it doesn't mean that you're actually the killer. But what do you think, though? Do you think that there is something about the Dear Boss letter that means it was directly from the killer? Or do you think that it was a hoax that was written by a journalist, perhaps Frederick Best of the Star, the person who confessed to it in 1931? Which one sounds a little bit more convincing to you? And if you're listening to this in the playlist, please feel free to keep on going, and if you're listening to this as it comes out regularly, then I will see you over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.